you have the pleasure of living in a domicile in holy matrimony with a man who enjoys his knickerbockers. What was the reaction
I
from
mean,
old Mr. Wilder?
let me report live and speak on behalf of all Knicks fans, where I say that there is more hope than there's been in a long time, which I don't know. I don't know if this is the Knicks being cruel to their fans to give them this kind of hope, or if this is hope that is actually warranted. Because watching the Knicks last night against the Timberwolves, OG fit in really well. I mean, and I think that he is what the Knicks needed in terms of working with Jalen Brunson and Julius Randle. But I need your help in determining if it's too high, I guess. Like
It's
how,
always too high. It's always
okay.
too high. Let me
Okay.
just say right now, it's always too high. OG Anunoby is a really good player. He was an integral part of a championship team in Toronto. He's been a guy who's been highly coveted on the market. At the same time, you look at what you give up. You give up RJ Barrett, who's been an up and down player
Mm-hmm.
for most of his career and most of this season. He started the season strong and then lately has struggled. You gave up Immanuel Quickley, who is kind of the right kind of brash, hot-blooded energy you want coming off of your bench, but not necessarily one that you want pining for a bigger role, which is what he is. And obviously he's going to be a restricted free agent. He's looking for a certain payday. And you gave up a pick that's going to be good. But again, this isn't a draft that I think people are writing home about. So you made this move. And by the way, you also got Precious Achiuwa, who I think is an incredibly underrated part of this deal as
Mm-hmm.
a guy who could play the four, he could play the five. He's a stretch four. He can shoot the three. He's a good defensive player. He's a good rebounder. Like all of those things are things that the Knicks need, particularly because Mitchell Robinson is pretty much out for the year, perhaps. So when you add all those things, it's like, okay, that's a good deal. All right, what are the downsides? Number one, OG Anunoby is going to be an unrestricted free agent at the end of the year. So I hope you like him a lot enough to
Yeah.
pay him, right?
Right.
Number two, OG Anunoby, much like Immanuel Quickley, has bigger designs for himself. Now,
Mm-hmm.
I'm not here to defer anybody's dream. I'm just here to relay to you the information that this is a guy who, in part of him wanting to get traded from Toronto, wanted to be somewhere where he could have a bigger offensive role
Mm-hmm.
where he could reportedly command a salary in the neighborhood of $40 million a year. Although the reports also said he'd be willing to take a discount off of that in return for playing in New York. So this stretch right here, in some sense, is an audition for the Knicks as much as it is for OG Anunoby. OG's
Right.
got to prove I'm that guy. But the Knicks have to say at the end of it is like, oh, first of all, we have to give him the opportunities to show he's that guy. And if he does, what's the prize? The prize is you get to pay him a lot of
Right.
money. The reality is, in the short term, he fits what they do a lot better than RJ Barrett does.
Yes.
I talked about this a long time ago, the civil war between the thinking game and the impulse game. And you got the thinkers like Brunson, like Hartenstein, like DiVincenzo, like these are the guys that play kind of. I would throw Grimes in that list, like guys that are playing the game, quote unquote, the right way. They're making basketball IQ decisions with every pass, dribble, and shoot. And then you
Mm-hmm.
got the impulse guys. The impulse guys are Quickly. The impulse guys are Julius Randle. The impulse guys are, to extent, Mitchell Robinson, even though he's limited in what his impulses can allow him to do. And those are the guys that are like, yeah, basketball, yeah, but the white got a ball shoot. Like it's there's which when it's going, it looks great, but when it's not going, and particularly when you get to the playoffs where it's all thinking basketball, those guys tend to struggle. So you got rid
So
of one of those guys and quickly. RJ Barrett, I always felt was like 1 foot on one side, 1 foot on the other. So you got rid of him, and you added a couple of guys who are more of that type of basketball. So we'll see. It's part of a bigger plan, I think, for the Knicks to make themselves a smarter team.
so you think so OG is a
Yeah.
thinking basketball player.
Yes. Having said that, like I said, this guy has bigger designs for himself. So
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if part of his thought process is going to be like, I don't want to do the right thing anymore. I want to see
Right.
how powerful, how where my potency goes, and that
Listen,
can go a lot of different directions.
New York City will do that to people. They get there and all of a sudden, if you can make it there, someone once said you can make it anywhere. I am just personally happy for RJ Barrett that he got to go home. He seems very excited about it.
Yeah.
The Raptors were all over that with their social media. Got to him real quick, and RJ looked happier than I've seen him in a long time. There wasn't a void behind his eyes, which I have sometimes felt that there was in New York City.
Absolutely. He had that glaze about him.
Yes.
That's like, man,
Where you
like
want to be
this,
like, are you good? Are you
yeah,
good?
it's almost a catatonic state. And
Yeah.
I mean, that's playing in New York. That's playing in New York under all those expectations and scrutiny. And I would argue, despite the great success of the Giants and the Yankees over, the last 20 years or whatever, the Knicks are still the most scrutinized team in New York, more than the
Easily.
Jets and Aaron Rodgers and all that. Like, all that stuff is fun and funny and exciting and high profile, but it goes away at some point. For the Knicks, it doesn't matter whether they're good or bad. They are always under an immense microscope. There's another level to this that our friend Tom Haberstroh wrote about. RJ Barrett is represented by Bill Duffy of WME. Respected agent, has a lot of clients all over the league. He's been around, represented Yao, represented Carmelo Anthony, represented Steve Nash, among a host of other high-profile Hall of Fame type players, right? OG Anunoby is going to New York. First of all, do you know what agency represents OG Anunoby?
I do. CAA. Am I correct?
CAA. Oh, okay.
Am I also correct in saying that he is represented by Leon Rose's son?
Yes. No coincidence there. Who, by the way, you know who else he represents on the Knicks?
Yes, but now I can't remember. Jalen Brunson?
Jalen Brunson. There you go. So you have the president of the team. His son represents the new acquisition. The president of the team, son represents the free agency acquisition of a year ago, who is also the son of the assistant coach. Again, setting up this cozy affair at Madison Square Garden, where if you're represented by those three letters CAA, it's welcome aboard. If you're not, it's like, well, we have no use for you, or maybe I shouldn't say no use, but we know we're not going to be adept at acquiring those guys because the other agencies are rightfully wary of the Knicks, not just because of their connection to a rival agency, but because of their past and the way they've handled things in the recent future.
Well, I am certainly not on the Knicks, but
oh, you're one of them.
Shout out to CAA.
She's one of them. She's one of them.
Maybe the Knicks will draft me. I mean,
yeah. You know what?
What?
My mind just said shot forward 18 months in the future. I'm Charlotte Wilder, Madison Square Garden Sports, like hosting Oddball.
No. Listen. Here's the difference. I might be CAA. I am Madison Square Garden is not a fan of mine. So there's a little,
I don't know. Maybe they didn't know you were CAA. Now that they know, it's like, oh, well, why did you say so, Red?
I should have told them.
Champagne flute. Here you go.
Knicks, I hope you're listening.